بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. Inshallah, we'll continue with our text, a critique of the Palmyran Creed, which is deconstructing Ibn Taymiyyah's theology of resemblance. We reached up to page number 80, and alhamdulillah, we're moving along. And as I said, we're going to do a little bit more reading, and I will summarize, inshallah, because I think the main points we got through this book, we've extracted some points, and now we just need to follow them through, inshallah. Bismillah, let us begin.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said, when the Ash'ari scholars described Allah Ta'ala with certain negating attributes, sifat salbiya, they did not intend negation alone. They also intended the perfections that those negative attributes entailed. When the scholars said that preeternality, qidam, is a negating attribute, they meant that its antithesis indicates the removal of an imperfection, i.e., a beginning for Allah Ta'ala's existence that cannot be affirmed for Allah Ta'ala. That meaning is false, and we negate it by affirming preeternality. As is
Here,
obvious.
so whenever you have, and we told you the attributes of Allah, the scholars divided them into sifatun nafsiyya, as-sifatun salbiyya, sifatul ma'ani, and as-sifatul ma'nawiyya. Whenever these four categories, those salbiyya, Allah is attributed with them, and their opposites are impossible. So those attributes are sifatul kamal, attributes of perfection, and their opposites are attributes of deficiency, right? So if Allah is attributed with al-qidam, having no beginning, the attribute of al-huduth is impossible for him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, to being a created event. And this attribute is extremely important. And when you understand it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning and everything other than Allah has a beginning, it should be easy for you to understand how Allah is distinctly different from his creation. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the people came to him and they asked him about the beginning of this world existence, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded, as Imam al-Bukhari related in his Sahih, كان الله ولم يكن شيء غيره. Allah existed and there was nothing other than him. That's it. And that alone should make you understand easily why the scholars say Allah exists without a place, without a direction, without a distance, without any of those matters, without a body, because all of those things are other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now,
As is obvious to any intelligent person, negation of this imperfection also entails a perfection. He whose existence is without beginning is intrinsically pre-eternal. He who is intrinsically pre-eternal is also intrinsically self-subsistent.
here, what it means that he is pre-eternal, meaning he deserved that attribute for himself. And if he is pre-eternal without a beginning, he is free of need by his, he deserved the attribute. So he's free of need, and if he's without a beginning, that means there was nothing else, so he doesn't need anything. And that's what Allah said, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ عَنِ الْعَالَمِينَ, that Allah is free of any need of any of the creation, right? And these two attributes are important for you to understand. The attribute of al-qidam and the attribute of al-qiyamu bin nafs. Now,
This
the
link,
attribute of not having a beginning and the attribute of being free of need of anything other than Allah. Being free of need of anything other than himself. And I shouldn't even describe it like that. Being free of need, put it that way.
this link between the negation of a beginning and affirmation of self-subsistence is apparent. The same may be said with regard to the other remaining negating attributes. Their antithesis indicates the negation of non-existence that does not befit Allah Ta'ala, and this is what is meant by negation.
So here, what are those as-sifat al-salbiya? They are al-wahdaniya, al-qidam, al-baqa, al-qiyamu bin nafs, al-mukhalafatu lil-hawadith. 5. صفات السلبية هي 5. They are 5. Al-Wahdaniyah, oneness. So that means that Allah does not have a partner. Al-Qidam, pre-eternity. That means that Allah does not have a beginning. Al-Baqa, everlastingness, means Allah does not come to an end. Al-Qiyamu bin nafs, free of need of anything. That means Allah is not in need of his creation. Al-Mukhalafatu lil-Hawadith, that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala does not resemble his creation, which means what? That he's not similar to his creation. He doesn't resemble his creation. He's not like his creation. Those 5 are attributes of perfection, and they indicate that Allah is clear of any imperfection, right? These sifat, as-sifat as-salbiyah. Now,
This matter is clear, and it is not appropriate for anyone to disagree and object to it. Ibn Taymiyyah, however, was not concerned with negation as such. In fact, most of his objections were against those who denied that Allah Ta'ala is a corporeal body, an accident, subject to boundaries and direction, and a locus for contingents. Anyone with a sound mind knows that the negation of the indwelling of contingents is a perfection for Allah Ta'ala
and
because
keep this in mind because it's highlighting. When we're talking about Ibn Taymiyyah, his whole argument in terms of the attributes of Allah was to establish al-jismiyya lillah, right? So his point is neither affirmation in wording and or negation in wording of jism, but in meaning an establishment of sifatul jismiyya, attributes of being a body. So he would say in the word, we don't say Allah is a body or not a body because it wasn't related in the text. But in meaning, he gives all the attributes of bodies to Allah. And when Ahl-Sunnah negate al-Jismiyah and anything that relates to it, Ibn Taymiyyah would respond and try to refute that because that would negate his anthropomorphic belief. Do y'all understand how that works? It's a very deceptive way of getting a false idea across. You want me to give you an example of that? First, did you follow what I said about Ibn Taymiyyah? He would use wording that would appear that he's saying one thing, but he used that wording to contradict the statement of Ahl-Sunnah, who was refuting his real conviction. So his conviction was that Allah is attributed with attributes of bodies and direction and location, right? But he wouldn't say that directly. He would use verses of the Quran and the Hadith on their apparent meaning, which would entail that while actually saying we don't say Allah is a body or not a body. And so you don't because we only say what is committed in the text. But as we show, he doesn't say what is in the text. He comes with many things that are not in the text. But to safeguard his false belief, that was a ploy he used. Let me give you an example of that. In our time, Al-Wahhabiyya, who called themselves as Salafiyya, they took advantage of the relationship of the West and Saudi Arabia to spread their ideas in the West. They took advantage of the relationship between the government of the West and the government of Saudi Arabia to spread their religious ideas in the West. Once that was accomplished with the support of the West, right, they spread their ideas through their oil money and through their books and through their funding, training students. Then they spread the ideas far and wide. Then when Ahl Sunnah comes and says, no, these ideas are not correct, they say, no, let's just leave the subject alone. When they've already established their ideology. So if you remain silent, the default position in the West will become the Wahhabi doctrine. You see the game? So don't discuss it after you've already established a false conviction in the minds and hearts of people. Similarly, Ibn Taymiyyah spread those ideas, and then he said, we don't talk about Allah as a jism or not a jism, while you put the attributes of jismiyah in the minds of the people. Y'all follow the analogy here? Do y'all follow that analogy? Because this was happening. So when the Ahl Sunnah remain silent, they've left the people into default Wahhabi convictions. They've already muddied the water. So if you don't come and purify the water, it's going to be just dirty all the time. The average person you meet in the West, in America, who didn't learn correctly is a default Wahhabi. They don't have any other thing to, because the waters was already dirty. If the people that Ahl Sunnah don't explain, the people will by default be Wahhabi. So the one who says we don't want to argue, we don't want to dispute, no one wants to argue. But we must clarify, or else the default position is going to be bad creed. You have to explain, or everyone will be left with bad creed. So no, let's not have the discussion after you've already spread misguidance and now don't talk about it. Well, why didn't you not talk about it before, before you spread those ideas? La ilaha illallah. And this was the work of Ibn Taymiyyah. Go ahead.
Anyone with a sound mind knows that the negation of the indwelling of contingents is a perfection for Allah Ta'ala, because being described with such a thing is imperfection. Negating that implies that all of his perfections are eternal. As is well known, Ibn Taymiyyah affirmed those things for Allah Ta'ala. Indeed, he considered such things perfections for Allah Ta'ala and conditions for the existence of anything. Because of this belief of his, Ibn Taymiyyah would accuse those who negated them from Allah Ta'ala as having denied Allah Ta'ala's existence. According to him,
they say that if you believe that Allah exists without a place, you're negating his existence. You've described a non-existent thing, as if the place is eternal, without a beginning, which Ibn Taymiyyah talked about. He said the eternity of the kind of Al-Arsh. This is another deep thing. So, and he has Qidimu Nawi al-Arsh. the eternity of the kind of the arsh, which is another one of his misguided ploys. And that's why they say he came up with this concept that there are hawadith, there are created events that don't have a beginning.
According to him, existence can only be ascertained in that manner. Ibn Taymiyyah believed that negating things from Allah Ta'ala does not entail perfection. On the contrary, he considered that such negations make Allah Ta'ala equal to non-existence because it is equally plausible to negate those things from non-existence as well. This claim is clearly and undoubtedly false, as we explained earlier. We conclude, then, that this principle of Ibn Taymiyyah was only for the sake of defending the doctrine of anthropomorphism and resemblance.
Right. So his principles that says that negation does not entail perfection, right? It was done, that concept he had, to aid tajsim and a tashbih, which was his madhab. Madhabu tajsim wa tashbih, anthropomorphism and resemblance. Ibn Atta'illah went to prison to refute Ibn Taymiyyah. They did have a discussion. Yes. Go ahead.
Some of what Ibn Taymiyyah considered as attributes. Here we shall mention some of the things Ibn Taymiyyah considered as attributes. From this, we can see his real objective behind this principle.
Attributes, sifat haqiqiyya, real, literal attributes. So these are real, literal attributes, right? Now,
letters and sounds. He said, likewise, that he does not speak. By speech, Ibn Taymiyyah meant letters and sounds that subsist in Allah Ta'ala's entity. Exalted is Allah Ta'ala from this doctrine. Displacement. He said,
so among the things Ibn Taymiyyah ascribed Allah speech, his speech, with al-harf wa sawt, with letters, a letter and a sound, which contradicts Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And you would find them, that those people who followed his doctrine, they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks with letters and sounds. And this is anthropomorphic in and of itself.
Displacement. He said, or that he does not descend. It is known that according to Ibn Taymiyyah, descent, nuzul, is displacement from one location to another, and this is the meaning of movement.
Here, al-intiqal, which is transferring from one place or displacement from another place. So when he said yanzilu, he understood that as a real attribute that is literal, meaning Allah comes from an upper location to a lower location, which is intiqal, which is displacement. And that necessitates al-haraka, movement, which is an attribute of imperfection.
Direction. He said,
similarly, al-majid or ityan, Allah coming from one place to another.
Direction. He said, as well as those who imitated them. Those who said that he is neither inside nor outside of the world. It is well known that being inside or outside can only be conceived for someone who is a corporeal body and limited and in a direction. It is known that Ibn Taymiyyah believed that Allah Ta'ala was outside of the universe in a direction relative to it.
Here, this is an important concept that we'll come to later, I believe, in this book, but we'll indicate it here, is the concept of al-Wahhabiyya, which was from Ibn Taymiyyah, that Allah is outside of the universe. He's not inside, he's outside of the universe, separate from his creation. And when you have separation from one thing to another, that is distance, and that is only related to bodies, right? And here, so Ahl-Sunnah say, Allah is not inside the earth, the universe, or outside, because it being in is indwelling, Being outside is the separation of entities, bodies, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clear of all of that. Direction, place, and being a body. And to be inside or outside is attributes of bodies. Now,
These are the most important attributes that Ibn Taymiyyah wanted to establish and defend with his essay. As for the attributes of knowledge and omnipotence, he made no efforts in establishing those because they were already a general agreement between him and his opponents in that. We say general agreement because he opposed Ahl Sunnah regarding the reality of knowledge and its types. He said that it is two types, direct and indirect. He also believed that omnipotence was a modality by which contingent subsisting within Allah Ta'ala's entity come into being. Ahl Sunnah, on the other hand, affirm knowledge that it is eternal and not contingent, and say that it befits His Majesty and is not reactionary, and say the same regarding all the divine attributes as were detailed before.
mhm.
As for his statement that sharing in negation and negating attributes necessitates sharing in reality, which according to him either
Hold it, go
implies,
again.
as for his statement that sharing in negation and negating attributes
Oh, okay.
necessitates.
Uh, there is something before that. It says later he's going to discuss the speech of Ibn Taymiyyah in relation to other anthropomorphic issues in belief, like direction, like uh, being confined in a place, like uh, istiwa with the meaning of sitting, as he mentioned in some of his principles. So all of these are points that Ibn Taymiyyah believed. Direction, Allah being confined in a space, that al-istiwa has the meaning of sitting. All of those are ideas that you will find in his books. Now,
As for his statement that sharing in negation and negating attributes necessitates sharing in reality, which according to him either implies a negation of Allah Ta'ala's existence or his resemblance to inanimate objects, that is not correct in an absolute sense, and we have already explained what disfavors it. Were we to negate two contraries from him, that would clearly be false. However, if we were to negate two contradictories from him, one of which is rationally sound, that he be described with sense, it is a mitigated perfection, such as knowledge and power, whose opposites, ignorance and inability, are impossible for Allah Ta'ala, then negating contraries and contradictories such as these altogether would be undoubtedly false.
mm,
As for those opposites that are considered unmitigated perfections, being rather relative and limited perfections, there is nothing wrong with negating both of them from Allah Ta'ala. An example of such opposites is the notion of Him being inside the world or outside the world. The term inside and outside only apply to someone or something that is a body, jism,
so
and is
here,
not hidden.
when you have two opposites, both of which are not befitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to negate them is valid. So when you say Allah is not inside or outside the world, why? Because that which is inside the world is a body, and that which is outside of the world is a body, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be attributed with attributes of bodies. Now,
And as is not hidden to anyone, neither term entails unmitigated perfection, nor is there perfection in either movement or stillness.
so the
Rather,
same thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not attributed with movement or stillness, because the thing is either moving or stealing, these are attributes of bodies. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, laysa jisman. He's not a body.
all of these certain clear imperfections, since they necessitate corporeality, limits, and needing movement or stillness to be perfect, all of which indicate the imperfection of the essence described with them.
No.
As such, when we say the wall is not blind, it does not necessitate that it is seeing, since it is not receptive to the quality of sight in the first place. Blindness and sight do not apply to a wall, so to negate blindness from it does not imply the affirmation of sight for it, and vice versa. The same, however, cannot be said with regard to a human being. If we say Zayd is not blind, it necessitates that he can see, since it is proper that he, as a human, be described with either blindness or sight. Given this, when the Asharis say that Allah Ta'ala is neither inside the world nor outside of it, it is not a judgment that it is not a judgment that negates existence as Ibn Taymiyyah claimed. Rather, they consider their statement sound because they negated corporeality from Allah Ta'ala and knew that the qualities of inside and outside only apply to physical bodies, and
So
thus
if you
both.
understand the point here, when the Asha'ira or Ahl Sunnah, and let me put this quickly, I did before, just in case you're not used to terms. Just wanted to put this. Allah. So Al-Asha'ira or Al-Ashariya, that equals the Asharis. So when we say Asharis in Arabic, you can say Al-Asha'ira or Al-Ashariya. So you may see it, like in this book, it keeps saying Al-Asha'ira. And sometimes people may not realize this, the same thing. Right? Ha, 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 Farouk. You're a comedian. Round of applause for Farouk. Right there. Go ahead. Yeah, my is equal R. Okay, go ahead.
And thus both are negated from Allah Ta'ala, who is not a body. This negation, therefore, does not necessitate that Allah Ta'ala does not exist. Instead, it necessitates that Allah Ta'ala is not described with corporeality. But according to Ibn Taymiyyah, saying that Allah Ta'ala is neither inside the world nor outside of it necessitates that He is non existent. Ibn Taymiyyah was of the view that it is impossible for anything to exist unless it is a body. According to him, nothing exists except bodies, and nothing exists except that it takes up space and has limits. Because he maintained that these are
Takes up
essential
space, has limits, and is in a direction.
because he maintained that these are essential aspects of existence, for him negating directionality, corporeality, and their commitments, I'm sorry, concomitants, was no different to negating existence as such.
So that means those things that necessitate that. So either it's direct, a direction, or bodily attributes, or that which entails that.
These judgments, according to Ibn Taymiyyah, apply to Allah Ta'ala and creation equally, contrary to the position of Ahl Sunnah, as we have explained. It is true that negating two contraries simultaneously from Allah Ta'ala is false, as is negating unmitigated perfection in comparison to its opposite, such as ignorance and knowledge, and power and inability, according to the view that inability and ignorance are actual things. We should also note here that Ibn Taymiyyah would mix up his refutations against Ahl Sunnah and mention them while refuting other sects. That was intentional on his part.
لا 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 أهل السنة الأشاعرة أهل السنة. So put Asharis because he's talking to them specifically. Because Ahl Sunnah is vast in terms of when they speak of Ahl Sunnah, because Ibn Taymiyyah will use the term Ahl Sunnah, and he didn't consider Al-Asha'ira as Ahl Sunnah, right? So when he says Ahl Sunnah here meant, he's refuting Al-Asha'ira, the Asharis, who are Ahl Sunnah.
We should also note that Ibn Taymiyyah would mix up his refutations against Ashariya and mention them while refuting other sects. That was intentional on his part, since it was his desire to give people the impression that all of the sects and groups he was refuting shared a single judgment and shared a creed. The people of knowledge know this to be utterly false. Because
And
Ibn
here,
Taymiyyah,
That's the Wahhabi way of saying Al-Asha'ira or Al-Jahmiya. So they would use these terms in their books today. They call Al-Ash'ariya, they call them let me reverse that. Al-Wahhabiyya or the Ash'aris Jahmiya. And what they do is Al-Jahmiya is known as a deviant group who denied Allah's attributes. So when they speak of the Ash'aris, they lump them in with Al-Jahmiya, right? And act like the beliefs are the same when they know the beliefs are totally different. But all of them negated their bad beliefs of anthropomorphism. But they tried to extend the Ash'aris to the extreme negators of Allah's attributes, which is false.
Because Ibn Taymiyyah equated the different sects and creeds to Ahl Sunnah, he made several fallacious arguments, some of which we have already discussed. Taking a look, we see that Ibn Taymiyyah said, "Thus, whoever says he is neither separate from the world nor inside of the world is akin to one who says that he is neither self-subsistent nor dependent upon another, neither pre-eternal nor temporal, neither preceding the world nor contemporaneous with it." Here Ibn Taymiyyah took the statement, "He is neither inside of the world nor outside of it," and argued that it is no different in its analysis to the other statements he mentioned. Therefore, if the other statements are correct, then his statement is correct. And if they are contradictory, then this is contradictory as well. So the question is Ibn Taymiyyah's claim true? Is the statement, "He is neither inside of the world nor outside of it," equal to those other statements? Is Ibn Taymiyyah's analogy sound?
Let's
Analyzing
stop
the
there.
statement.
What page are you on?
Page 84, the bold section.
All right, let's stop right there, inshallah. No, that's good, because then we're going to go into this subject matter. If there are any questions quickly, what we covered, please feel free. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allah. So Ibn Taymiyyah did it verses against Ahl Sunnah. Allah. Allahu Akbar. It takes a couple seconds. If your questions are coming, it takes a couple seconds to get to me. Allah. And when you're if you wanted to really understand the claim of Al-Wahhabiyya who call themselves Salafiyya, all you got to do is look at the works of Ibn Taymiyyah. They're just repeating what Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned. Sometimes they go further, but in general, it's the same. Yes, Jihada, whenever we get the books, inshallah, we will let you know. Please send your information to info at MMACinc.org. Tell you, I guess we're done. May Allah reward you all. Please share the video. Let's keep the work going, inshallah. We have many people are learning and benefiting, inshallah. We'll keep it, the knowledge being spread, and people will be able to learn enough to convey themselves, inshallah, with confidence. Tayyib. Assalamu alaikum. I remind you tonight, is it true that had not Ibn Abdul Wahhab been intrigued with Ibn Taymiyyah? Yeah, it was Ibn Taymiyyah's stuff that he revived. And that's a relation between religion and politics. Why he's so famous, because he was actually used to substantiate the Saudi rulership. So it was religion and politics mixed together, which made him relevant. Inshallah, maybe one day they won't be so relevant. If more of the Sunnis speak out, the less relevant they will be. But, too many Sunnis got their hands in Wahhabi pockets or trying to compromise for Wahhabi fame. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. What methods do you think the Wahhabis use to overrun Sunni mass? Ignorance of Sunnis. Ignorance of Sunnis and money. 2. Number 1, if they can just... I see many Sunnis, and this game, I want to share, and I don't want to go long on this, but too many of people who are Ahl Sunnah are ignorant, and they can't explain well. So when they're confronted with an educated Wahhabi, they fall, right? They start to make other excuses. Really, you don't have strong knowledge. That's your problem. And you don't learn. So therefore, when you're confronted with the Salafi or Wahhabi doctrine, you don't know how to properly respond. So you use all other excuses to get out of it, right? That's a lot of it. Especially because the issue of the Wahhabiyya is issues of Aqidah. And many of the brothers, Sunnis, that they didn't study Aqidah well. They don't know it well. They may know fiqh, they may know some other stuff. But the area of Aqidah, they're very weak in Aqidah. And the books that they learn are so brief in Aqidah, they never had an opportunity to learn. So when it comes to the creed, they're very weak. And they hide that weakness by escaping the discussion. I don't want to argue. No, you ignorant. That's what you don't want to do. It has nothing to do with you don't want to argue. You argue in other things, but this, you don't have knowledge. So you running from the discussion. It ain't about arguing, right? It's not arguing. You can't handle the discussion. So that's the easiest way to get out of it. This is my bad opinion of them. But I've noticed, because I listen, is the problem is you weak in creed. You need to sit down and learn and stop trying to lead. Learn and then lead. You can lead after you learn. You need to sit down and learn. That's what is important. That's what's missing. And you can fool some people some of the time but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. All right, Imam Naeem, that was my version of a Scud missile. But really, we all need to learn Aqidah well. That's our problem. That's our problem. And I understand no one taught you. A lot of times people didn't get a chance to learn. That's not, that in and of itself is not blameworthy. That I never had the opportunity to learn. Okay, you didn't. Now that you have the opportunity to learn, don't be arrogant. Sit down and learn. And then when you learn, go teach. Right? There's nothing wrong with not having the opportunity to learn. Unfortunately, Black folks didn't have access to certain amounts of knowledge. It's still like that. People always hiding stuff from us, right? So that's not bad in and of itself. But now, when the opportunity is there to learn and your arrogance prevents you from learning, that's a problem, right? Sit down, learn, then go teach, right? I understand. We got to get out of this ego stuff. It's killing us, right? Because if I don't know and I can't admit I don't know, what's going to happen, if you trust me, you're not going to know either. If I'm unlearned and I don't admit I'm unlearned and you think I'm learned and you follow me, what's going to ensue from that is you're going to be unlearned. And that's not good. That's not good. If I don't know, I should say I don't know, and we need to go learn, right? We need to go learn. And this ego stuff, I just want to be the man. Come on, man. It's bigger than me and you. It's bigger than us. We got children, generations, and they can't afford to be ignorant. You know why? The people of misguidance are spending millions and millions, even billions of dollars misguiding people. So you can't, because of your ego, allow people to be unlearned. They have to learn. And you have to provide the means for them to really learn. And if you don't have it, don't try to give it. فَاقِدُ شَيْءٍ لَا يُؤْتِي. The one who doesn't have a thing can't give it. Take them to someone who can give it to them. Make sure people learn. That's the bottom line. Make sure people learn. It's our obligation, especially if we're leaders, to make sure that people learn. Even if I don't have it, I'm going to make sure you get it from somewhere else. But you must learn. All right. With that, I'll close and come to an end. Barakallahu bikum wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.